let's just jump into the speaker's introduction. So Lola is a professional executive leadership coach, and she is also the kind of professional who basically train other professionals. So if you can give us, a couple sentences about you, Lola, and how did you come into the role you are now holding?
Absolutely. So you all know my name, Lola Chetty. I'm Mauritian French, been in Hong Kong for 5 years. So I didn't start my professional life as a leadership, a change management consultant or a coach. I spent my first career at the bench in the judiciary, then became a volunteer social worker, and then the second paid career, professional career. So I really, what I do is I specialize in creating content for leadership development of executives in organizations.
So Lola, you basically, thank you very much. I hear you really well, but some people, they maybe not. So maybe you can just send a couple of sentences in the chat, in the group chat, so people get what we was talking about. Yes. And I will ask Ken right now, as he's kind of jumping in and out. So I hope that he is, okay, he's back. So Ken, we just, you just missed the introduction of Lola, but I hope that you will get the info, because she will try to send some info in the group chat. So guys, Ken is passionate about biology, artificial intelligence, and sustainability, but there is many more things what Ken is doing. And I just hope that he will be able to speak with us right now. Let me see if he is on. Kent.
Okay, I'm on.
Okay, he's back. All right, Ken. So Ken, we was just talking with Lola. Basically, I was asking her about introduction, and you was missing it out because you was fighting with the technology. But I would just like to ask you if you can give a brief introduction about yourself, what you're up to right now. And so, people who are watching us, they kind of get a little bit of background about what you are about right now.
Great. Yeah, so, Ken Zelig, I've been working in China for about 10 years now, mainly in sustainability and biotech. I've been basically managing and developing different types of applications, one in aquaponics, actually, commercial farm in Shanghai when I first entered here, all the way to actually, working for a VC, and then working to actually build BMS, building management systems for indoor health quality, and also for energy consumption issues, and deploying that worldwide. And now I finally have started my own company, and I've become CEO of that company. What we're doing is developing AI systems for genetic research and applications, so genetic diagnostics, so we can actually develop new types of therapeutics and help scientists create new type of therapeutics with a SaaS system. So that's what I'm currently doing, and yeah, and now I'm actually I've just moved to Hong Kong, and now developing further. So my team right now is was placed in the United States, Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, where most of our programmers are, and also our biotech team here in Hong Kong and Shenzhen. So we're definitely a global team united by the internet. So happy to be here.
Amazing. Thank you very much for a comprehensive introduction. I know specifically we was talking together about the challenges of collaboration, but we will just jump into it. So we don't have Bolun yet here. I think that we will see if we will be able to kind of jump in, and I will try to sort of like bring him on board with some of the questions. But we will not wait for it. We will just basically continue with that as we are right now. So Kent, I just want to be sure that you, I don't know, because you didn't hear the introduction about Lola, right, before?
No.
Okay, so just to kind of briefly.
I wrote it in the chat. I just.
Okay, can you hear her now, right now, by the way? Can you hear her right now? Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So she wrote in the chat, but she's a professional leadership coach, and she's working a lot with executive teams and different kind of leaders, basically. So training the trainers, basically training the leaders. And I would like to basically kick off this whole thing because we are right now in the verge of a global problem. So far, it's mostly, I mean, Asia is, really in a situation where a lot of people basically have to work from home. And even though I think that we all kind of, feel natural to work from, our laptops, it's something different when people who never been prepared or trained to work, basically whole month, let's say, from their home or online. So there's a lot of challenges. And so, I mean, in theory, virtual teams, they should give employees the chance to build, a dream team without the boundaries. At least that's what some people say. And for employees, it offers a freedom and flexibility, right, to attain a healthy work balance. At least this is something which is kind of the promise of it. But in the practice, things aren't so easy, as we know, even practicing right now, because communication can get often muddled in the teams, especially when people never met face to face. And trust and collaboration can also suffer when people are sold like in silos, and sometimes it's hard to tell if if colleagues are tasked too much or too little. So I was actually checking one of the Harvard studies, and according to them, basically, of course, there's a bunch of problems, but three major things which every virtual leader should face, and these are communication, trust, and productivity. What is your experience when it comes to the crisis situation, which require a little bit unique approach to communication? Do you have any kind of experience you would be able to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, well, as a startup, there's always crises situations, and so just recently, we basically have been developing a product, and we've been sort of racing to develop this product because we need it for a new investment round that we're going for. And so what I had to do was, because actually we're also sort of like maintain our finances as well. So I had to coordinate with our teams in Ethiopia and also the United States, and also some of the people on the ground here. And I had to coordinate an effort between everyone to sort of realign our finances so that we can actually really focus and double down on this product. And I had to communicate. So what I did was I called each person. There's also a big transitioning happening in our company right now, with a lot of movement is happening with the top sort of like management. Basically the founders, some founders are leaving and some founders are coming in. So I basically gave a call to each one of my each person on the team and discuss with them what is actually happening, how it's going to be affecting them, how this is just changing, what my thoughts were, ask them what their thoughts were. And so I discussed everything with the whole team individually. And then we actually then came together and discussed everything as a whole, as a team, because the conversations that I had with my team individually were very different than the team. But I did this all online. I didn't actually have one face-to-face conversation with anyone. I had to do this all online. So it was interesting, but it was quite efficient with the internet. And I have I'm coordinating with people in Ethiopia, in the United States, and here. So but it was done rather smoothly, and we were able to actually get this thing through, and they understood the ramifications, and everyone's still happy with it, and everyone is still on the team. No one has left, and everyone's still pushing forward with developing our product. So it actually went quite okay.
Really cool. So maybe I'll ask you, Lola, can you reflect a little bit on that from your perspective, and maybe pinpoint some routines or principles you can also relate to from your experience, and when it comes to especially communication in a crisis situation, or when in Ken's situation where there's a lot of dynamic changes, and you cannot just follow like a typical sort of like structure.
Yes. So there are two components. One is leading the virtual team, which itself comes with its sets of challenges and special rules. And second is crisis. So I'll actually refer to what's happening here. I think that when we are leading a virtual team and we are not used to it, it's not the usual, there are no guidelines. What happened, it was a bit organic. So people would call each other at any time, or there would be long periods where it would be quiet. So this is the process part of it. I'll speak about this second. I think the first thing for any leader to handle is to handle the crisis part first, because if people don't feel safe, they don't work in the same manner and they're not focused on the work. And it's also about being human first. And one of the feedbacks that I got was also how much did the leaders themselves, it's about being present for everyone. This is the time that the leader has to be present online, even more than in the office, and being able to really ask people what do they understand, but also what thought leadership and even research shows is that it is the leader's duty to actually make meaning of a situation for others, because the rest of the team are looking up to the leader more than ever in that situation to kind of think, okay, what is happening? What are the ramifications? What are the decisions that we may have to take under pressure? I think that's the first one. Attend to the people side of things first, really get an understanding of what they understand, and also discuss with them about the situation. The second one is really the processes. What I saw is that the processes were lacking. So for teams who usually work together, certainly they did their best, but processes would have helped better. And this is where I help my clients, is to set processes, set a routine. Every day at a set time, everybody, the team gets together. Routine and rhythm get things going. It also sets structure in the way that people are speaking together. It's important to connect. For example, even before speaking about work, when you're at work, you'll say, hi, how are you? Have a small talk. When you're behind a screen, it's even easier to feel disconnected to others. And I think this is the time to really make the effort to ask people on a one-to-one basis. Let's go around the chat room and see what's happening for everyone.
So, okay, so I hear basically that is reflecting what even Ken said, basically that if, especially when the crisis situation happening, tools are amazing. Of course, technology is progressing, but fundamentally it's about the human connection, and it's about the present moment, to be there and to actually really connect and go just personally and reach out to the person, be there basically. So this is kind of essential, what I can hear from what you guys saying. So it all kind of sounds like it's a lot about the culture. It might sound like a little bit of a buzzword, but it's not just about the leaders themselves communicating well to others, right? Especially when it comes to teamwork. So do you guys have, or I'll maybe just get back to Ken, do you have some thought about how effectively can people talk or communicate with others about the communication? If you understand what I mean. Because one thing, you're a leader, right? You communicate well and you just really, get on. But actually, in order to really kind of escalate the whole collaboration and stuff, there need to be talk about the collaboration. You know what I mean?
Right. So when I first started the company, actually, all of my engineers, every single one of them, and the scientists were completely against having video conferences, completely against it. And I was like, guys, we're effectively in 5 different cities in 3 different continents around the world, and we're working on the same thing. We need to have these conferences. And it blew my mind. They're like, oh no, we can work on Slack. We can just communicate, through messaging. And it does not work. I mean, things just fell apart. And I was like, okay, here, we need to communicate. Let's just try it. Let's just see what happens. Okay. And so I started with one meeting, and then they're like, oh, okay. And then everyone started to become a believer. Like it was just me and one other guy. I had one other programmer that was like, this makes sense. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my God, we got so much done. We started just communicating for the first time. We completed so many problems. Like there was a huge backlog of issues that was going on because there was no communication. So I had to show them by actually having a first meeting. They were like, wow, this is really impactful. And in one meeting went to, okay, we got to limit to 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, fine. And then then we have one 30-minute meeting. Now we have roughly like three meetings, and each of those meetings are about 1 to sometimes 3 hours long, depending on the meeting. And so it just completely changed. So we have a meeting for biotech, and we have 2 meetings for programs every week, and it's changed complete structure and the speed and the breadth of which we're developing. So you just got to show them. they have, and then that's how they become believer. They're like, okay, wow, this makes sense. And now everyone is for meetings. Everyone loves meetings, because not only you have the speed at which we're developing, but also people can communicate. They feel like this sense of like unity among each other. Like you can see that, and like we can talk about like, you know, we talk about, you know, we'll do a little talk about like what's going on with, you know, with current events, you know, what's happening in Ethiopia, what's happening in China, what's happening in America, because it's all kind of connected to all of us, you know. And we, you know, we talk about the coronavirus, what's happening, how it's affecting. You know, I have one of our biotech guys in Shenzhen is actually from Hubei province, and he's stuck there, right? So it's pretty crazy, but we still talk to each other. And so it really brings, you know, it brings a community within the team, and it sort of also gives them the space to work, you know, and do their work. But then, you know, you need to actually tie that back in, and the best way to do that is to just show them, right? And they become believers.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks very much for sharing. Is there anything, Lola, would like to comment on the canned reaction on this question?
No, it's absolutely spot on. I mean, there's nothing that beats face-to-face meeting, and actually being able to engage with each other. Just being able to see people creates a very different kind of relationship, because it's not just a voice, it's another human being, and it reinforces that sense of sharedness. And when people feel that they belong, the more they feel they belong, it's also a motivating factor.
Yeah, that's for sure. So there was quite a lot on the, let's say, on the soft side of this whole situation, but we also need something else. We need the tech, we need the technology. So I would like to jump into the question about how do you guys, because I mean, there's a lot of questions, right? We have like, you know, Facebook, WhatsApp, Slacks, and, you know, Google Hangouts, whatever, Remo, we have many things. So how do you guys go presently, maybe? I'm not basically asking for like the best solution in the world, but what is from your perspective, what you are guys using, you know, the kind of software, you know, we can make your communication easier, or what you are looking at when you're basically setting up the new team and communication? Is it like, you know, it doesn't matter, you just kind of choose what people use, or do you kind of have some sort of process in place where you know, really think through it and you set up certain tools which are really intentionally, you know, basically wrapping up what you need to communicate? How do you guys go around it?
Yeah,
I'll take that. I'm not a techie at all. So basically, I'm using the tool that can gather the most people around, that's easier to join people, so that I don't create a problem for them. So that's why. So we Google Hangouts and also Zoom.
So the simplicity is basically the access and simplicity is on your side the most important. And the kind of communication and work you have usually with your clients or with the teams is on a level of let's say management or these kind of things. It's not usually product development, right?
No, it can be also for development. I also do training on Zoom, because you can actually project slides. You can use a whiteboard. It's actually very, very practical when you can't meet the client. It's been a lifesaver.
Thank you.
In the last weeks.
Cool. How about you, Ken? How you go around it? Because you obviously, you are guys, you know, I mean, you're a bunch of IT guys, basically, except you. Sorry, except you. So what about you?
Yeah, so the first thing I invested in was Zoom, and so I got the subscription because it's one of the only communication devices that actually works in China and the rest of the world. And so that was really key. You know, we were using the free version, which allows only 40 minutes, but it's like, you know, that's, you know, when you cut an intense conversation in half, it's not the same. So I invested in Zoom, and that was an incredible, you know, return for us, because I mean, just we could have a free flow of conversation continually, you know, about what we were doing. So Zoom is definitely a big one. Google doesn't really work in China, so that kind of was not, you know, doesn't really help too much. Slack, we also, of course, do all of our communication development work in Slack, and the way we structure it, most of our development is through there. And then the final one, of course, you need to have a project management tool. This one has been the most difficult. It's just really hard for people to sort of get on the same ball on project management tools. So we must have gone through I've gone through like 5 or 6 of them already. Just people just don't, it's really hard for people. You kind of have to force them to use it, which I don't want. I just want them to whatever is most comfortable. So so currently right now, you know, we're basically just working around GitHub and GitLab as a sort of like you know, focusing on all of the work. So all the programmers know how to build on that, and you know, basically I'm trying to sort of send out consistently, be extremely organized on Slack, so we can actually organize our work and what we're doing, who's doing what. But if you know, right now we have a team of like 10, but I definitely, if you're going to be having around, you know, 20 or 30-person team or 40-person team, you definitely need a project management tool to understanding what's going on. And you can use a lot of my friends who are actually in the same area are using Airtable as a really effective tool. That's, you know, cheap. Actually, it's you know, it's pretty much free for most people if you can actually spend the time to set up the whole processes. And I'm still trying to look for that, you know, that magic bullet, you know, project management tool. I mean, it's just, I don't know, it escapes me. I don't know. Like, it just,
Where is the magic?
yeah, where is, I don't know. But I mean, so far, you know, Slack has been, you know, incredible. The only bad part about Slack, it doesn't work in China.
Yeah, but Slack is for like chatting and right, like having conversations. Like this is basically like a communication tool, right?
Yeah, it's a basic communication tool, but you still need to organize, you know, your team to be, you know, effective and execute. And it does well, but then if you have a lot of moving parts, sometimes you sort of like, you know, you lose what's happening.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, what we've been doing is just basically using really strictly, you know, communication, Slack and Zoom, and that's basically it. And then GitHub. So you can kind of see what's going through the pipeline. You know, we're a little bit more free, but the point here is that this setup requires that you have an extremely organized team of individuals, like that each person can work by themselves and can push themselves. Because if you have a very junior graduate or someone who's very junior, it's very hard for them to be focused and organized by themselves and produce, you know, good work. Sometimes they'll just slack off. And I've had a few people who've done that, who are sort of new to the team or needed someone behind them. You know, just some people are just proactive and others are kind of just waiting for you know, the instructions to come in.
Yeah.
So in order to actually survive and thrive in this type of work environment, you absolutely need to find those proactive people. If you don't have them, it just doesn't work. Or what you do is you have one proactive person that manages a team, you know, around other people who are less proactive, but they do well when they're pushed by this proactive person. So I found that to be extremely effective.
Well, we actually have a whole section later on. I have a couple of questions on the productivity itself. But before that, I want to talk a little bit more about the trust, because this is one of those other elements which is, you know, like everybody say, yeah, of course, people like, you know, teams have to, you know, trust each other and stuff. But trust is a key in relationship, right? Like we cannot build a relationship with somebody we don't trust. But it can be hard when in an environment where the face-to-face interaction is not real or is not even possible, and when it's only digital. Of course, we're kind of getting used to it, but let's talk about the way to, let's say, strategically increase trust in collaborative teams. And, you know, also we can talk a little bit about the roadblocks of the virtual team building, because this is part of it. So how can a business leader accurately convey the, you know, let's say, the magnitude of a situation in a time of crisis, and, you know, do it a trustworthy way? What is your experience with these guys?
Shall I take it? I think it's around being able to build trust. Certainly, if you are resting on already trust built before there is the crisis, it's always a plus. But I think I'll probably be the devil's advocate here, that in times of crisis, there is another opportunity to build trust for the leader, because people are stressed and people tend to come together more and communicate more naturally, because they feel stressed. And I think when the leader, it's the same components to build trust, the leader has to show himself to be credible. He has to show himself that his team can rely upon him, that so for example, let's take communication about what's happening. In the first few weeks of the coronavirus, when after the Chinese New Year, no one was really clear about what was happening. But it's for the leader, and this is what I advise my clients, to actually know as much in terms of facts, because what you are going to share is also going to impact your credibility. And secondly, I think it's also you lead by your own composure in the face of the situation, and preventing not going into overreacting or underreacting
So
as
it
well.
sounds like you basically saying, if I understand correctly, that there is no like one single, let's say, kind of rule or how to do it the right way. But what sounds to me important is the authenticity. Like if somebody's in the leading role, I mean, the authentic leaders are always, I mean, this is important anyways, but especially in the crisis, in that situation, this is literally where there is no way around. I guess that maybe you can also relate to it a little bit. As you said, there's a lot of dynamic changes in your, in your business, and also you say you have somebody who is from Wuhan. So, did you felt some sort of pressure on yourself as a leader to sort of, step out and build a little bit more of, let's say, the trust of the team that you will handle the situation and stuff?
Yeah, I had to. Well, in this situation, my goal is to continue development with what's going on. Just maybe have everyone focus on what the goal is, and of course, like like said, keep everyone sort of have that feeling of safety. So my goal through this transition was to make sure that everyone understood exactly what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. And what I'm trying to do is always like say, hey, whatever questions you guys have, I'm always here anytime, morning, noon, and night, in whatever time zone, I can talk it out with any questions that you had. And I continue to speak to all of them consistently, one-on-one, throughout all of this transition, to make sure that, okay, what are you feeling, how you think, because they're not going to sort of like speak up and say those things during our mass meetings. And sometimes, some things come up, but there's always some things that are hidden there. So continually it's like reinforcing that and telling them, what's going to happen, what to expect, and then it actually coming to fruition. And they saw that what was happening is happening. That really sort of developed, a consensus around everyone, like, okay, what he says is true. And, for me, one of the biggest things, like, I never miss a meeting, no matter what. I actually schedule everything around my meetings, no matter what, unless it's something completely very, very serious. And I always keep the same time, the meetings every single week. Everyone just knows it, like it's scheduled into their brain. Okay, it's going to happen. And so because I never, ever leave, everyone always stays in the meeting as well. And I think that also brings trust. There's no one who's like sort of like fickle, or everyone's there when they say they're going to be there, and they just know that they're going to be there, and they know that I'm always going to be there. And that sort of creates that trust. I mean, you kind of want to do that sort of family team sort of a trust, like, hey, we're all in this together, and I'm going to be here no matter what. And you just show that by making those sacrifices, because I'm usually on at night, and so I'm the one sort of taking usually the brunt. And I'll still be on till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, no matter what, until we get the job done. So and through this specific transition, I had to basically pay my salary to all of my team, and they saw what was going on, and everyone's happening. And so this really develops a really strong bond with everyone, and everyone's still on, and even through all of this craziness, and it's just it's really good to see. But yeah, you gotta continually just make those one-on-one connections. I think is really important with everyone, and the team connections as well. So it's just, you need to be very consistent, and if you're very consistent and what you say actually happens, then people really trust that.
Thank you very much for sharing a little bit of the personal journey there. I know it's not an easy to be like founder, co-founder, entrepreneur, because a lot of people talk about a passion, like you need to have the passion, but many people don't realize that passion is not just to be enthusiastic, and it's actually a lot about a sacrifice. And this is not the bad part of it. It's just a part of it. It's just how the life is. And I guess that when you are consistent with such an attitude, then people can really feel the authenticity, and this is where the bond is created. So this is awesome. Like, do you have, Lola, any of your experience with neither your own situation or situation of your where like a not usual, let's say, or unusual situation happen where there has to be some unique approach to, let's say, team building, and you witness something which you can share with us?
Absolutely. I think it's always when the leader in a situation of crisis, when he goes above and beyond, it's just like for any human being, we never forget people who are here in times of difficulty. And consistency, as you say, consistency, reliability. But I know leaders who, for example, when the bonus of their team was cut for some reason, they actually gave their teams money out of
Mm,
their own pocket. One of my clients
okay.
did this. And I think this kind of thing, people never forget you for that. It's also leaders who go, I've had actually, I can remember one client where somebody from her team actually got sick, and a close family member in the country where she was, and that leader stepped up to help that family member of her
Wow.
team.
Okay.
So it's going above and beyond in a difficult situation
Mm-hmm.
for your team.
Well, that's again, it basically sounds like in the end of the day, the technology can be amazing. We can have a lot of experiences from, let's say, leading management, but it comes back into the identity and basically, being very human oriented when it comes to the fact that we are dealing with people and not with the nicknames and numbers. It just sounds like. All right, guys, thank you very much. I would just like to jump into the productivity part of, the challenge, because we was talking about the communication challenge, let's say the trust challenge, and now I would like to dive a little bit into the productivity, because let's be honest, low productivity is it's a risk when people work outside of the office, where there's like a physical breaks and you can see the people and stuff, right? And speaking of virtual teams, it is often an environment without the day-to-day oversight. So it's natural that some team members, may not use their time wisely. And on the other hand, there are also some people that they might have, some high risk of burnout when they work in remotely, because they have a lack of boundaries. I don't want to like wink into the can, but let's talk about now how let's say, how are you guys actually dealing with this? What is your perspective on the productivity and the virtual leadership on that side?
Yeah, I can go first on this one. I mean, so I give you an example, like, so my guys, all of my programmers, they used to be actually from a one sort of AI programming team, and then they decided to leave. These were my best programmers that I had on my team, and so I was like, no, don't leave, come on, like, just get back on the team. And but they didn't want to work at that team, they wanted to work by themselves, and so they worked by themselves for a little while, and these guys were highly sort of proactive, and they can, highly motivated, self-motivated individuals. So they did quite good work, but I can never really tell how they were feeling, because I'm never really there, or what they're actually doing. But the thing is, you can see through their work. So every single week we did a demo of what they did and what they worked on, and you could see that they were accomplishing a lot. But then that they started to sort of like get slight burnout, and they started to actually want more compensation. They want to get paid more for being freer, which is kind of weird. And so it's just I don't know, I didn't think that would actually happen. I thought, like, okay, well, you're free, right? And that should be fine. But it's funny, like, only my two guy programmers said they wanted extra pay, while my girl programmer, she's like completely cool, realizes how incredible it is to work from home, and she prefers it, and she actually took a cut in her pay so she can actually work from home. So it's like, it's really kind of funny how that works. Just working with guys and girls actually is a whole different thing, but they work very, very differently. But yeah, my guy programmers, they were like, okay, we need an extra pay, And so I said, okay, we'll do that. They started producing, but I noticed that, they were doing a lot, but I couldn't help but feel that they were doing more when they were actually, actually in a team, actually, in somewhere that they were rooted in. So I don't know, maybe I don't know. That's just my anecdotal feeling. I mean, what I saw, I mean, I felt, it just seemed like they weren't producing as much as what they were producing before. But they were being, they were freer and they were being compensated more. So it's a really funny issue. But my girl programmer, she operated just as well, if not better than before, than her, her being on her own. So it really depends on the person, if they're accountable. Yeah, I really do think if you have like pockets of people who are actually sort of like working together, you kind of have at least like 2 or 3 people sort of like bouncing ideas off, and there's a more development process happening there. There's more sort of, checks and balances kind of happening. So yeah, it's a tough process, but they were actually happier when they were not, in management. So and they were now sort of, they realize how incredible it is to actually work from home. And so I don't know. I mean, they're more loyal, but I don't know. I don't necessarily say if they're more productive generally, but they're definitely more loyal, I would say.
Thank you very much for sharing. It's I'm also now just kind of kind of ideating here, but it is possible that maybe it's also related to just the generation, I guess, and also maybe just the niche, like when it comes to guys who work in, as a programmers or graphic designers. I guess this is also a little bit different when it comes to let's say the routines and stuff than when it comes to some other jobs. It's just I guess. So what do you think, Lola? I mean, you consult a lot of executives and I guess a lot of top companies who have like huge teams and leaders have to deal with a lot of people. What is your experience when it comes to this particular issue?
I mean, my own experience, certainly the research which shows that it can be a little bit more testy. And by the way, I hope you do compensate that girl programmer because she's your best worker, by the way. And I think it all depends. If people are very structured and they are used to work as a virtual team, it's easier. It's always when you're doing things on the fly. But I think that putting in regular meetings, talking to your team, being able to see progress, recognizing the progress, so not just leaving them with a project. So this encourages them to reach their deliverables. And also I think at the moment, especially when people are just new at working in virtual teams and they just receive guidelines, having very clear milestones, very clear milestones and deliverables, and being able to have regular catch-ups on their progress does actually ensure that no matter what, so it doesn't really matter how much they're working, it's about the output. Is it going to be there?
It sounds like essentials, but in fact, I know that a lot of people, I would even say necessarily in my own case, I was always, my past in a startup scene, it's, especially in the beginning, before the startup is ready and scale, in the beginning, it's a lot, I mean, it's chaotic. And if you have a small team, there's just a lot of communication happening all the time. But when there is the time where the startup kind of, should sort of like really get into the structure and then, scale or grow, it's a different situation, different dynamic. And I guess it's also very different when we're now talking about, let's say, corporations and then the startup as a comparison. But let's be a little bit concrete. So when it comes to the best way to, what is the best way to ensure everybody's doing their job without invading their privacy too much? I mean, the question, let's say, of tracking hours, I'm interested to talk about that because I've been, hearing it a lot. A lot of people talk about it, write about it, but I personally never really, track hours. And I hear a lot of people have very, I would say, controversial opinions about it. Some people say this is amazing and it increased, the productivity a lot. On the other hand, some people feel like this is really, kind of invading their privacy. And also we talk about the regular one-on-one checkups. How often conduct those or these?
Is that for?
It's a bundle of questions basically. But my main point here is like, what is the line from your perspective or experience between what is still appropriate and where is the line between kind of being too much and stuff when it comes to regular checkups or let's say tracking the hours?
I would say working hours are working hours. If we take the last weeks, people who just got into virtual teams, I would think that it would be normal during a normal working day that they could be called. And this is why it was even more important to have a regular meetings that people would have during the day. Certainly it needed arrangements and flexibility, but I think tracking, it all depends, because certainly you track your goals, you track the output, but the moment people start feeling that you're invading their privacy, you are invading their autonomy, then whether it is virtual or in the office, it can only have a
Mm-hmm.
backlash in terms of productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, like for me personally, like my previous business that I worked in was also in sustainability consulting and engineering. And so I had a boss that was extremely micromanaging.
Okay.
But he micromanaged from Hong Kong, and and the whole team was in Shanghai. So he would force, I mean, he was just, we were all connected on Skype, and he would just start talking to you on Skype. Hey, da, 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 what are you doing? Da, 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 I was just like, it's like, man, he's always like just pushing you. He's not pushing you, and he's pushing somebody else, and he's pushing this, and it just drove me crazy. And I just felt like I was a prisoner. And then he would force me to go and work on the weekends at the office, like just completely invade. And I just vowed I would never be that guy. I just vowed I would never be this, because I left him, and I was like, this, I can't work with this guy. This is horrible. And I was just depressed. I was really depressed, and I could not, no productivity whatsoever. I just was sat and looked at the computer and stared at it, and nothing came out. My mind was dead. And so I was like, this is not the way to do it. And so I took those lessons and then I applied that to my team. And so, the thing is, you can't have full autonomy. I mean, because that just does not work. Just people kind of just go crazy. You need to have a very strong sort of like structure of like having, goals, like Lola said, having goals, having, okay, this is what our goal for this week is. This is our goal for the next 2 weeks. This is our sprint, this is what we're doing. And you talk about consistently, what has everyone accomplished for the day? And you talk about that, but you discuss it, but you don't make it sort of like something that's sort of controlling them, right? I mean, you want to give them full autonomy, and you want to make it feel like, oh, this he did this, and they kind of have like a soft competition, like, oh yeah, I did this and I did this, but it's more of like, everyone's sort of like working together for the same thing, and they want to complete the task because it just feels good, and they're building something that's actually interesting and it feels good. And you want those people on the team. And I track that. And then the people who are not like that, who are not on the same page, who are either negative or who are just, not actually performing. And because they're not performing well, the rest of the team is performing less. I try to talk to those people one-on-one and tell them like, look here, I don't think you're performing as well. I give them a chance. And if they break that chance, then I have to let them go. That's just how everyone knows that they're on a team and they're committing to the team. And I really, really try to reiterate that. And you need to really put in like, okay, this is our main goal. Our main goal is to accomplish this, right? This is what we're trying to do, right? This is the whole point, you got to drive home the mission. And you got to consistently tell them and talk to them about that. And then, having these meetings, 3 times a week just shows like sort of the consistent development, but everyone is showing their work and discussing their work. And it's kind of like, everyone really feels good about that. And so I think that's a really good structure for developing and for people to sort of like exchange ideas and really build forward. And as soon as it's just really hard to sort of like follow hours, because you don't really know exactly what they're doing. You really want to focus on their productivity and their output. What are they actually building that actually makes sort of like is adding value to the company, is adding value to the team, right? What is actually coming out from that? And I just feel like you can't really do that by looking at someone's numbers, like those hours. You hopefully, they're working at least 40 hours a week, and they're completing X, Y, and Z goals. And if they want to be more proactive and they want to add more goals to that, you really reward them for that. Like, wow, that's incredible. Like that's, I really like what you did here, here, and here. And you start to see the flow, and everyone's like, oh yeah. And then you start to reward them with, feedback and, in different methods. So I think that's really important. And then seeing these, showing all these tasks being ticked off and all these goals being met, here's a quarterly, here's X, Y, and Z, and reiterating that, people get really hyped up about that. So I think that's really important.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I mean, I have to say that there's all of these things together. Basically, it's not separated, right? Like it's all of that. There is this trust building, there's this transparency, and all of these things you guys were talking about. I have to just say that I was checking the Q&A, and there was a couple of questions. So I want to ask actually the first one, which get the most votes. Somebody was asking, what are the 3 first essential steps you would do to set up a remote work when a crisis, happening? Let's say now, of course, like you have your own experience in your business and let's say in your coaching and stuff, but let's say that I can imagine that that might be a question from somebody who, never go through such an experience. What would be, let's say, the 3 essential steps you would give them as a, provide them as a guidance to how to actually set up, this kind of thing, how to set up?
So the 3 steps, I mean, of course, communication, right? But really it's everyone's like going to be on WeChat or WhatsApp, right? I mean, I think that's what, that question is being asked by someone from China or here. And so they're already halfway there, having those systems. And then it's all about sort of like organizing that system. But, I think, setting up the communication zones, right? WeChat is like sort of like Slack, and having this, you can set up easily like a WeChat group or a WhatsApp group, and then just bring all your people in. I'm not so sure how, depends on how big your team is, but of course you want to set up specific groups, with your core team and then also your full team, right? So, and also different business teams, and be a part of that, and really sort of like show, the communication is going on. And then really sort of having, a complete whole team meeting, right? Like what we're doing here, or on Zoom or some other network if you're choosing. Just find one. Yeah. Find, yeah, exactly. Or Remo, and find one that works and just stick to it, and really sort of like create the culture around that. And, I think you also need to sort of like set the boundaries, and set the expectations. Yeah, set the boundaries and expectations of what, everyone is to expect during this time, and know that because it's a crisis, like your their family members are going to have, something to deal with, and, give them some time, right? But but you need to listen to everyone first, and, what are their problems? Maybe have a discussion about, okay, what are your issues right now, and how can we fix that? And then, create a support, structure. I think that is sort of, key, right? And then, and then go from there and build, right?
So if I would synthesize what you said, basically it sounds like you said, if I would put it into 3 like buckets, or like, it's like big ears, listening a lot, set up the expectations and the kind of zone where this thing can happen, and it should be on a channel which is the most easy and accessible when it comes to that. Do you have, Lola, from your perspective, something you would say, otherwise, or from different, sort of angle when it comes to this question, when somebody was asking what would be the 3 essential steps to, set up a remote work, and somebody never done it before?
I mean, you're spot on. It's about being present, but I would say that more than ever, leadership by example matters. When there's a crisis and you are leading a virtual team, if you want anything from your team, you have to first demonstrate that behavior.
Okay. So this is,
so it's listening to them, engaging with them, but also giving them structure. I would say give them structure, because everything around them is unstable at that moment. So the leader can create the stability intra-team with rules, processes, and certainly engagement
So let's
first.
say that nobody actually have this kind of experience, and then now this thing have to happen. So first, let's open a group chat, put all the people in there, and let's set up some structure. Let's say we will have a, let's say, call every day at 10 o'clock, or just sort of, check in. And then we will basically have just very briefly, what we're going to do and stuff like that. So give it at least a bit of a structure, and then be consistent to basically follow up on that. And perhaps if there is a challenge or issue, maybe just jump on a call separately, call with that, and be there. There is another question. We will not go through all of them because the time is running out, but I would still like to go through at least one of them, because we will just go very soon into the breakout session. How would you compare Slack, Microsoft Team, and Trello, or other team management tools? He said, we are a team of 10 having quite a number of work stream and tactical combination, regular and small discussions. So maybe you can just, guys, give it, if you have experience with that, of course. If you don't have, that will be hard to answer that question.
I don't.
Yeah, so I mean, again, I mean, in order to have, you have number of work streams and tactical combinations, regular small discussions. Yeah, I mean, I think, using a variety of those. I mean, again, I think Slack is incredible. Really, we get so much done, through that. Again, I really believe that Airtable has been really good for a lot of my friends, using that as a means for product development and product management, just overall managing your team, if you can actually set that up very well. But it's highly accessible to everyone. So again, you want to have something that's accessible to everyone very easily, and allows for effective communication. So everyone sees that, and they can sort of like revert to that, and they kind of becomes habitual, right? I mean, you want to make it a very habitual sort of process. If it's not a habitual thing, and it's very hard and sort of bulky for people to use, it's not going to be, no one's going to be using it. I mean, that's what happened with my project management applications. Like I've gone through 5 or 6 of them, and it's crazy, but it's because people didn't have access. Like some people were like, oh, it's not on my Android. Oh, it's not, because they want something that's what's mobile, right? Something that actually is on, it can go on the iPad, can go on the computer, can be connected, everywhere virtually. And so you need to actually have a system that's stable enough and verbose enough, and just, it can be connected to all these different systems, and they can actually talk to one another. So you want a system like our Slack can communicate with GitHub, right? And GitHub and Slack can also communicate with some of these project management tools as well. If in Airtable, I know it can also communicate, have what they call bisynchronous sort of communication, so they can communicate back and forth. And Google has been incredible because you have Google Calendar, you have Google Gmail as well, and all these things that you can basically share files among your whole team. So if you have G Suite, Google G Suite, which is what we have for business, everyone has their own account, and you can actually share all of your templates and all of your other structures, and also share your Excel tables if you have the Excel tables as well with everyone. The cheaper form of that is, of course, is Airtable, and you can communicate effectively throughout your whole team, right? And so I think, but you want to focus on like 2 or 3 and just use that and just make it work, instead of like what we did was there's always like somebody having a problem, but you want to be sort of judicious about it. And just what I would do is also like look how people communicate now, understand how their communication structure is set up, and you just want to be able to tap into those already developed communication structures. Don't try to reinvent the wheel and force people to do something they're not used to using. You just use what they're already using and incorporate that. So say, for instance, they're using WeChat or WhatsApp, there might be some WhatsApp methods that actually connects WhatsApp to Slack and vice versa, or WhatsApp to another program, and that way you have this very sort of like seamless structure that they are talking to one another.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like if there should be some sort of rule, or sort of rule of thumb, maybe it's, let's put in a center something which is very highly interconnected, something which is very agile, let's say. And then, exactly as you said, don't try to reinvent the wheel. It's about communication. It should be simple if possible. So let's build it around it. And then And then there will be maybe the question. I personally I like Slack a lot. We have actually a Microsoft team in our office, so that's what people use. But for many other communication, I mean, most of my friends are using WhatsApp. And because I was living 6-7 years in China, the other half of my friends, or even I would say like the larger part of my friends, are using WeChat all the time anyways. So I just find out that I can't hold more than, let's say, 3 kind of channels of communication, which I will really pay attention to. So I guess that sometimes when it comes to communication among, variety of teams, as Eric here mentioned, that they have 10 different people and number of work streams and different kind of combinations. I think that the search for the silver bullet is maybe too it maybe doesn't exist. So maybe you will need to make some sort of compromises on that. But this decision might be done collectively as well, so just kind of like really look, as Ken said, really look at what you guys have, put it together and see how can you just make it more simple, more interconnected. And I mean, again, it's really hard to have like one sort of silver bullet rule for that. All right, guys, thank you very much for, all of the conversation. I think I kind of moved it a little bit 10 minutes because we started 10 minutes later. So I hope everybody's fine with that. So right now I will ask Jessie to sort of come in or to help us to basically switch off into the networking mode. And maybe she will like to wrap up a little bit and give feedback. And so just thank you very much, Ken. Thank you, Lola, for joining in a crisis to talk about virtual leadership and crisis. So please, Jessie, go ahead.
Sure, thank you so much. And thanks everyone who came today during the very first webinar we host on Remo. And as you can see, we're already testing how we can become, vocal and be an online influencer leveraging on some of these online tools. So before we end into the breakout session, love to just give you a little bit more idea what we do here, what we want to accomplish, what kind of community are we building. Because we're not just organizing single events in silos, we want to bring other people who are like-minded, who care about building a strong alliances, a very strong network to solve some social issues. I would love to get those people in a network so we can learn from each other, share the resources, and to scale up the project to make more impact. So stay tuned to our events because we organize monthly, and we would love to be we would love to facilitate if you have any idea that you want to, any events that you want to organize, any speaker you want to invite. But yeah, so thank you so much for today, and thank you our panelists. It's a great pleasure to have you. So now we're going to the networking session, and I think Marek will announce the game plan.